Hello and welcome to the webinar. I'd like to thank you for attending this afternoon. We will get going here. Matt, can you help me out with advancing the slide there? Great. Our webinar today is Are You Ready for the Internet of Things? And we're going to probably be running from about now, 12 o'clock, until about 12:45. So we should get this wrapped up so you have time to finish anything else you need to do before you get to a 1 o'clock meeting or so. You should hear audio now, as you see on the screen. If you have any difficulties, there's some dial-in information as well. This is a live event, and we encourage questions. So you have a control panel in your GoToWebinar setup there, and if any time you have any questions, please, by all means, let us know, and we'll see if we can help answer that for you. Let's keep going and let's get started. My name is Dave Kyle, and joining with me today is Matt Schmidt. Matt, how you doing today? Good, how are you? Doing great. We provide webinars for our customers, potential clients on an ongoing basis. This time, as we mentioned, we're doing the Internet of Things. We have about 25 or plus years in the IT industry. We support enterprise, education, and a variety of small and medium-sized businesses. If you want to reach out to me during the webinar, I'll double check a little bit in case you're having any difficulty with your control panel. But you can send me an email at dave@usetech.com. So let's get started. Just about Use Technologies. We were founded in 1993. We're located in Columbia, Maryland. We provide managed IT services and secure cloud solutions. We primarily focus on accounting, nonprofits, and legal firms in the area. And if any time we can help you out, we'd love to support you in that area. So please give us a shout. So as we get started, Matt, in our agenda. If you want to just cover that for us, we'll be obviously covering what is the Internet of Things, and then also what are these things. So what are the devices, things like that, but also specifically, the different organizations that are using consumers, government, and businesses, and we want to drill down and give some examples about how these different areas are being used and what kind of devices are being used and the opportunities in these spaces right now. Big area that we want to talk about too is security and privacy. Obviously, I think many of you may have heard on the news, because it made national news in the past week, about an Internet of Things attack that occurred and took down part of the Internet last Friday. So we'll try to cover that a little bit to understand what occurred last Friday, but not from too technical a stance, but just to share with you a little bit of what this all means for us going forward and the opportunity that's happening as well. And then finally, just talk about some of the business opportunities in the way of jobs, as well as some of the things we all do and work with in our daily lives. And finally, wrapping things up with a question and answer. If you have any questions, of course, we'll take some on during the broadcast as well. I'm going to take a quick look, make sure that we're doing okay. If anybody issues with the technology. First question is, will this be available for playback? And yes, I did hit the record button. I'll keep you posted on how we do with that, okay? There's just a few of us here manning the booth, you might say, so we'll see how we make out for you, okay? One of the things before we explain what the Internet of Things is we have a short poll. We were just kind of curious ourselves about your familiarity and your use of Internet of Things device. So I'm going to send you out a poll, and you should see that launch as a simple yes or no question. If you just take 10 seconds here for us to answer yes or no. Is anyone today using the Internet of Things device at their home or their office? Let's give everybody a second to do that. So, there's a lot of, going back to what people are filling out the poll, Matt, last Friday's incident was not the first incident that happened actually in the last month. There was another incident that we'll briefly describe as well, where the Internet was used to target and attack an actual individual website back in September. And so we'll explain what this technology was, how it was used to attack a site, because it is important to be familiar with what the downsides are, and we want to expose and talk about that. A lot of upsides taking place, but a lot of concerns as well, and be aware of what they are. So I'm going to wrap the poll up. Looks like we have about 60% of everyone saying yes, they do have a device they're familiar with or using. About 40% that don't. So I'm going to close the poll real quick. We'll keep us going. So let's just talk real briefly about what is the Internet of Things. And there's a lot of definitions out there. And one of the things we try to do is finding a concise and easy to understand definition of what the Internet of Things is all about. I really couldn't find one. I found one here on Wikipedia that I thought was pretty good, but it's pretty long. I like to think of the Internet of Things as kind of a global network of computers, sensors, and switches connected through Internet protocols. We'll kind of elaborate a little bit more on what that means, but there's a lot more to it, and you see it's different in different areas. Some is very active devices, some are very passive devices, and I kind of categorize most of these devices in three categories: sensors, switches, and screens. And a sensor is something as simple as a thermometer that's out there on the internet, and there's a lot of those that are being used by certain government organizations. Switches are simple devices that could be activated remotely, and I'll give an example of this as well in our demonstrations today as a light switch that you can remotely turn off and on. And screens could be something as simple as your iPhone, which a lot of devices are being utilized to enable and activate information across the internet in that way.
I think what's most interesting is that when it comes to screens and sensors, it's going to be put into things that have been around for probably 100 years, but you don't think of necessarily as internet-connected devices. But within what's coming down the pike, many of these things are going to have these things in them.
And some of the components and aspects of the Internet of Things, the elements have been around for quite a while. Some of it was utilized back when there were phone systems and sharing information through satellites, and now we're sort of collecting it all together. And the next slide there, the big thing is all the back-end components of all this. So what's behind the scenes? And behind the scenes, really is sort of tying this all together now is the internet, the easily accessible wireless components, as well as systems we all use every day with data being transmitted across the telephone systems, or wireless systems rather. Network routers is really important through all this. And then one of the concerns that a lot of organizations who are using the internet services are trying to evaluate is by adding the number of devices that we could be doing here, which could be our billions, is our back-end infrastructure ready for something like this? So I'm sure we're able to handle it, but that's one of the things that people are looking at. And then finally, there's other components, which are cloud services. And one of the major aspects of all this is database management in the back end. So there's a lot of technical, understandable technical components of all this, and being that we're in the IT industry, that's the stuff we're kind of evaluating and seeing how it plays out, where it's successful, where the downsides are. That's what we wanted to talk to you today about. So, what are some of these numbers? A lot of numbers being thrown around. It's been looking into this. Right now, there's about 6.5 billion devices out there. And a lot. Yeah, it's almost the number of people that are in the world right now today. I think there's about a little over 7 billion, something like that. And the growth is what's drawn everyone's attention to it all. Again, there's about a 30% growth of internet devices from last year. And kind of going forward, there's an expectation that there's going to be about 20 billion devices by 2020. So that's a significant growth, not only in percentage, but also in just pure numbers that are out there. And again, a lot of these devices, as you look at them, the components are really inexpensive. I mean, I can buy a webcam, which I'll talk about, from an online overseas website for $25, and it's a wireless, and I can plug it in my house and have access to it from my iPhone and be anywhere in the country or the world and see and look back at my house for less than $25. There's my internet device. So you start taking these sensors, these components, and throwing them into other types of situations. It becomes really inexpensive to kind of create Internet of Things devices out there. Probably the biggest market that we see taking and moving on to this is the healthcare market. And we'll elaborate a little bit more, but Forbes is actually thinking that this market's going to be $117 billion by 2020. So that's a lot. So the first thing I wanted to share with you is this a consumer-based situation. And actually, a couple of years ago, the use case for me was that I'm actually using this particular company's products. Was I'd come home at night, and my front lights, especially in the wintertime, like right now, the front lights would all be off. So I'd come home and there'd be people in my house, teenagers and such, and the place would be dark. So I'd be like, why can't anybody turn the lights on outside? So I'd turn all the lights on, and then I would go to sleep, and I'd wake up in the morning, and all the lights would be on, because those same people didn't know how to turn the lights off. So what I've done is started a couple of years ago, putting in a few of these smart home devices throughout my house with this particular product. I don't necessarily recommend it. I use it. I like it. So let's just watch a quick video of what this particular company provides in the way of smart home Internet of Things devices.
Insteon is a home control network technology. It connects you to the smallest devices in your house, whether you're at home or away. Devices like light switches, sensors for motion, doors, and leaks, light bulbs, wireless cameras, and more. Insteon's patented dual-band technology uses both power line and radio waves for the best reliability. Grab an Insteon starter kit. Each kit includes everything you need to get started. Insteon doesn't require expensive installation. Anyone can install a system. And better yet, there are no monthly fees. All you have to do is connect your hub to the internet and then start adding devices. It's as easy as plugging your lamp into a dimmer module. With the hub, you can schedule your lights to turn on at sunset or anytime. And it's never been easier to dim your lights with the touch of a button. Expand your system with additional modules as you need them. Easily convert lights by screwing in an Insteon LED bulb. With a leak sensor, receive an instant text message if there is a water leak anywhere in your home. Or upgrade your light switches to control hardwired fixtures. You can monitor your home from anywhere with wireless IP cameras and even adjust your thermostat while you're away. With Insteon, you'll never be away from your home. Whether you're at work or across the globe, you're always connected. Get started today and experience the power of Insteon.
So this is a really straightforward example of the Internet of Things, and like I said, I've used it myself and actually enjoy it, quite frankly, that I can come home at night, especially as it's getting darker outside, and know that the lights are on and waking up in the morning and knowing that they're off as I expect them to be. So I expanded a little bit in some other examples of using this with a web camera and how the lights, and let's give you an example of this. I recorded this last week. So this is just a screenshot of my phone pointed with a camera inside my house, my living room. On my iPhone, I have a very simple app that I run that was free to download. I click one of the buttons, which would be the living room button. It would enable me to turn the light on, and from there I get feedback that the light was activated with a green dot. And this was actually done here in the office. I just captured the screens, and it's pretty easy to set up. The example of this we're trying to demonstrate is that it is easy to use. It's relatively inexpensive. I think it was about $150 or less to get started with something like this. And you have this kind of capability. And so it's really becoming something very consumer-based at this point that anyone can kind of work with and set up. And you know, I've used it a little bit more. I had a sick pet in the house this past summer, used it. Also expanded it. I had some water problems. I used a camera to look at a water problem I had in my house. So I'm finding that the convenience of this is really pretty good for consumers. You know, if you have a rental home or something like that, there's a lot of power in something like this. And then the number of consumer devices, we've probably heard a range of everything from the refrigerator to coffee makers to all kind of devices out there that are now Internet of Things devices for consumers. There's quite a bit. So I just want to attest to having used it for a few years. Pretty easy to use, pretty inexpensive, and pretty reliable. Another interesting one that I kind of came across in the last 6 to 7 months is from Amazon. And have you heard about this one, Matt?
Not until you pointed it out to me, and I am actually an Amazon Prime member, so it was good to learn about this.
Yeah, another retail consumer-based situation. This is where a lot of Internet of Things are taking place that are more obvious, but Amazon's really getting into the retail and consumer space for Internet of Things. They have a huge back-end capability with their databases and cloud workspace systems. So what this is, these little devices here are called dash buttons. And these dash buttons are really something simple as they're wireless. So they can connect into your home Wi-Fi network. They have a little sticky on the back of them. They're about 2 or 3 inches long and about 1 inch wide. And the idea is you'd place them in and by the products where you use them, so by the dishwasher, by the refrigerator. And if you needed more Tide, for example, you'd simply click the button, it would tie into your Prime account, more Tide would be ordered, and it would show up in 2 days for you. So, I mean, it's the idea of how iTunes was successful, I think, a number of years ago from Apple, 10, 15 years ago, when Apple made it so easy to buy music by just clicking a button. Amazon's trying to do the same thing with these dash buttons, where you simply put this little wireless device, attach it right to your washing machine or dishwasher, and when you need some more product, you click the button.
And if you think about it, this is going to tie back to the supply chain, because they're going to be collecting data in terms of how often their consumer customers order these things, which is going to go down the field and affect some businesses in terms of how they manage their supply.
Right, and the idea is this: that I think they charge $5 for initially purchasing one of these devices. They rebate you back $5 in your next purchase, so essentially it's free. But I think they have about 80 of these dash buttons available now for different consumer products. But it's again, an Internet of Things device connected to your Wi-Fi on your network, connected back to Amazon, click a button, in 2 days you have something shipped to your house.
Excellent.
A little more on the home automation side, and again, a lot happening in this space, and I think the three big players in this are Google, Amazon, and Apple. And another example of Amazon really taking control in this space is their use of their product called Echo, which is a voice-activated interface, much like Siri is on your iPhone. Simply, this device is the cylinder there in the middle. It can play music for you. You can ask it questions. It'll respond. So, somebody wakes up in the morning and says, what's the temperature outside? It'll tell you what it is. You can order products. You can order Uber through it. So it becomes a lot of what Siri is for you in answering questions, but also an engagement to what services you get from Amazon, for example, as well as an entertainment system. And it ties also into third-party systems like that Insteon device. I don't have one as of yet, but you can give it commands such as turn the lights off in the living room, turn the lights off in the family room if you have those things set up with the Insteon system. So it's connecting into third-party products. Google just announced a Google Home system last month, which is trying to kind of catch up to what's being done here by Amazon. And Apple HomeKit has a system that's more API-based, which is basically code that's available for third parties to start beginning writing applications or third-party devices to start using Apple with this. It's tied into Apple TV as well as your iPhone as well. So there's a lot of potential happening with Apple, but Amazon right now is clearly in the lead over Google and Apple with something like that.
Yeah. And I think as people shop for these types of things, they just need to be aware that they don't want to buy necessarily third-party products that work with different systems. You want to try to. It's okay to try things, but you want to basically settle on one of these. And Amazon, I agree, is in the lead right now.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. It's much like I think you saw the desktop market, kind of have a race to the finish line back in the 80s and 90s, and then the smartphone market was a similar race to the finish line with who's going to take up your hands with which smartphone you're going to have with Apple and Google. And now we're having sort of a race to the home with Internet of Things, and what's the ecosystem that you're going to buy into that's going to be the best suited for what you're doing and work with the products you want to have. So as you evaluate products, you got to look at which ones work together and play nice is what it comes down to. Not all of them do that.
And we're lucky enough to get to dabble in all of it. So.
Well, it's a little bit of some geek action.
That's right.
So let's get a little further along. Another example. And this is a little more passive. Again, I've been playing with this, and they're called tiles, and they're not specifically a little more passive in a sense that it's using Bluetooth technology, not Wi-Fi technology. But another problem I had in my house, not my house, but with me, was I always found it difficult to find my wallet and/or my keys. Attaching one of these $20 devices that is called a tile, you connect it to your phone, and with Bluetooth, you have a 30-foot distance approximately. So if I attach this to my keychain, that little square on the left-hand side of your screen, and I click the button in my iPhone because I can't find my keys, it would start chirping and letting me know that my keys were within a certain area and I could hear the audio sound. They just came out with a smaller, thinner version for my wallet, which is great, so I can put that in my wallet. And if I'm looking for my wallet in my house, I can have the same functionality.
So if this is outside of the area, though, because it's using Bluetooth, it's not necessarily going to work. It's not a GPS-enabled thing like a Find My iPhone or the Android version.
Well, that's where it gets a little interesting, because they've enabled and cleverly come up with the idea that your iPhone can then start looking for your devices. But also, it kind of crowdsources other people's iPhones who are using tiles.
Interesting.
So if I had a bag, I left it, let's say, at the mall by accident,
right,
and I couldn't find it, I could simply get on my iPhone, click on it and say, I can't find this particular device, then anybody else who had a tile application and was walking around in the mall, it would know to register that system and give me notice that, oh, it wouldn't say who, it's very anonymous in what it's doing, but it's using essentially an internet device item, which would be that other person's iPhone, to identify where that is and show that information back to me. So I would get a notice on my iPhone that, hey, your bag, my tile was identified at a certain geographic location. Obviously, it's not going to do much good out in the woods, but in more urban areas, it does work, and people I know attach them to their bikes. Bikes get stolen, and different things like that. It's been pretty popular for those kind of things.
Interesting.
Let's jump a little more, a couple quick examples of local government. So, for example, we work with some organizations within the Baltimore-Washington region for public safety. One of them happens to be what's called CAD, and CAD's not computer automated design, but computer automated dispatch. It's basically the 911 centers. And the newer 911 centers have the ability to receive a phone call as you normally would. The dispatcher then has the ability to see and know where the police officers are located. Those laptops they now use in the police vehicles are actually Internet of Things devices that transmit information, geolocation to the dispatchers as to where the police officers are. So an incident occurs, whether it be sheriff, public, fire, or police officer, and they can see on their maps who's closest to the situation and dispatch the appropriate public safety officers to the situation that's involved. Another one is live transit that's going on out there now, where buses, when's the next train going to show up? There's a lot of geolocation information that's being shared and again transmitted back to the public. For that case, the public safety one is proprietary within the 911 system. And then I was even reading about how San Francisco is starting to use smart parking devices, where if you're looking for a parking spot, you can look on your phone and it'll actually give you some indications. There's a couple of parking spots in a certain street and things like that.
Interesting.
So in state government, actually in Maryland, for example, has been using a system called CHART for a while. I think, Matt, you said you used it over the years.
I have, just to really in kind of big snowstorms, just to check highways. We do have a lot of people out at different schools, so we wanted to make sure that roadways are clear. And I know even for your guys that need to get to Fairfax in inclement weather, it's important to know that streets are either
accessible,
locked with gridlock traffic or you can get through them. So it's been pretty helpful.
Yeah, so Maryland has a system, and really it was an older system that's been around for a while, but somebody recently wrote an application for it so that the app you see in the middle there with a screenshot from an iPhone is actually from a third party that wrote the app that accesses the information from traffic cams, speed conditions, weather conditions, and accidents across the Maryland chart system per se. So you can actually look at webcams on your iPhone to know how to travel home. So again, just another example of sensors and switches and screens being used at state and also local level. Federal government, generally it's been viewed that the federal government hasn't widely adopted IoT just yet. Certainly,
the military.
The military's been doing quite a bit. Everything from drones to soldiers, as I put on the screen there.
And NOAA, I think, has been using it for quite a while.
They're pretty much like the chart system that used in Maryland. They had older systems that ended up adapting it. I like to go fly fishing, for example, so I can get to the USGS water gauges site and on my phone know exactly in certain streams what the water levels are at. So it makes it kind of convenient before I'm running around and going up to drive somewhere 3 hours. Is there enough water? And this fall, for example, it's been pretty dry, so I wouldn't have gone up. Now, some of those things have been available on the internet already, but again, making it mobile makes it a little bit more Internet of Things kind of like.
And live.
Right. And then they're also changing some of this, like earthquakes. They're using systems now that use solar panels to charge the system in remote locations and then transmit it back out.
Interesting.
So it's a combination of batteries, solar, as well as information satellites that can then transmit data around. All right. So let's talk about the business areas. Matt, do you want to help me out with this?
So business was definitely interesting. Some of this was fairly new to us because it's areas that we don't necessarily work with customers. For example, agriculture. We don't have a lot of customers in the agriculture business, but this is definitely an area where it is revolutionizing these industries. So we're going to take a look at agriculture, transportation, manufacturing that we kind of mentioned a little bit before. Facilities management is kind of interesting because that's an area that I think has really been using systems like this in the past, but they have been wired directly, typically through phone lines. I mean, you think of the emergency, like every location has to have a phone line run up until very recently, run to an elevator. So if you got stuck in an elevator, you would be able to make a call. Now that is really kind of flipped on its head with wireless and the availability of some of these components.
Yes. Some of the agricultural one is a great example, even the USGS one and the earthquake one I described. As long as there's power, as long as there's a way to transmit information, and even some cases, we'll get to areas where those are active devices. We'll even give some examples of what I call passive devices and how they participate in the Internet of Things now, too.
Right. And healthcare, I think, is definitely fascinating, having heard a speech on that, which we'll talk about in a little bit.
Yeah, so from a train transportation one, I thought this was pretty interesting. Safety is a big factor in this. Recently, Amtrak's been starting to add sensors to some of the train systems out there. And what it's looking for is heat, distance, and activity. And activity is how much is it braking, how long is it braking for, how long is it traveling, those kind of information sets. And it's being able to manage the wheels and into a database. And then there are notices and alarms being able to be manage and track if there are situations and problems that are occurring with part of what's happening. And I think the airplane industry, had a very regimented set of controls of how to monitor when parts are being replaced. So every 3 months, certain screws needed to be replaced in certain parts of the plane.
Thank goodness.
Yeah, right. And obviously, it seems to work pretty well. I'm pretty sure the train systems have it as well, but this is an extra layer of opportunity for them to start monitoring and understanding a little bit better, and it's a way for them to, again, manage the database live with the system.
And I believe, I'm not 100% sure, but I believe that the last two accidents that they had in the Northeast, one was Amtrak, one was a local New Jersey train, both were areas where they hadn't finished installing these systems on there. So these are things that will hopefully increase the level of safety going forward.
I came across this one just this morning, and I had to throw it in because it was actually part of Internet of Things, but it was a passive one, which is a little bit different than the typical devices we always see. So Delta announced this morning that due to, marketing-wise, I'm sure they're going to tell you they're trying to do a big favor for everybody, but the regulation changes by the FAA, there's new changes coming about how people are compensated for lost baggage. So what they've done is they've put a new system in place and spent about $50 million into about 85 different locations in airports across the country to get it started, where all your bags have RFID tags attached to them. And an RFID tag is the kind of little tag you get in Walmart or Lord & Taylor's when you're buying clothes or something, and before you check out, they rub it over a little thing, and it deactivates that tag in there. It's very passive. There's no batteries. There's no wireless information. It's only activated when electrical currents pass by it. So your clothes bags that you're taking on planes now will have this same similar kind of tag, and it's being sent around the system. You could literally watch it on a map, as they're describing here, and see where your devices are being, where your bags are at. In theory.
Yeah, we were kind of joking earlier that now you can watch your bag go to California as you get off the airplane in Atlanta, so it's very convenient.
Well, I think it will help them out. It's going to certainly help. It's going to help them too, obviously.
Yeah.
You're making jokes about it, but
save them money in the long run.
Absolutely. I mean, it's good for everybody at this point. So they have Fly My Delta, I think it's what it's called, and Track My Bag feature just came out this morning, as a matter of fact.
That's awesome. So manufacturing, we talked about a little bit, and we grabbed this video, pretty short video, on the factory of the future and how the Internet of Things and real-time communication is going to affect that. So we're going to play that for you and let you take a listen.
We think the main technologies that contribute to the factory of the future could yield over $500 billion of savings, which partly will be split between consumers and partly with equipment manufacturers. there are three characteristics that will define the factory of the future. The first one is a lot more things will be done virtually. Today you still prototype a lot of things, and sometimes when you're going to production, you're still trying out layouts, which means from when a product gets first designed to when it finally gets to its end version that will be commercialized, you have a long lead time, which will be significantly reduced with new technologies. So product simulation, assembly line configuration, optimization, a lot of those things will start to be done in the virtual world. The second key characteristic of the factory of the future is the fact that it allows more human to machine collaboration. So for example, today industrial robots work completely separate from human operators. With collaborative robots, commonly known as cobots, you will be able to allow the operator to work alongside the robot and each other to adapt these tasks accordingly. And the third thing is there will be more real-time communication between enterprise systems and the factory floor, and a two-way flow of information, which will allow for real-time optimization of the factory, remote control and monitoring from anywhere within the enterprise, not necessarily from the factory floor. Naturally, with all the focus on automation and cost savings that comes with the factory of the future, there are increasing questions about what this means for labor. We think what it means is that manufacturers will be more location agnostic in where they locate their capacity. They will be more focused on where demand is and where the best supply chains are, rather than on labor costs necessarily. We think what the factory of the future will result in is a very significant change in business models for both manufacturers and equipment makers for decades to come.
So that really does kind of give you a taste for what's coming down the pike, and that affects everything from auto manufacturing to the supply chain that we talked about with Amazon. Just in terms of robots and real-time communication, and maybe in terms of the prototyping, I think virtual reality will even expand that even further in terms of what you can do going forward.
A couple of examples of agriculture for us. This particular company is adapting a lot of sensors. Let me move ahead there. No, that's right. Weather sensors particularly. So an example, everything from cows to grapes to whatever it is that's out there, there's a lot of different sensors that these folks, farmers and agricultural opportunities can start using. So, everything, the one challenge they have is power, and I think it's been satisfied in a lot of different ways, as I mentioned to you earlier, with solar power. So solar systems with a power adapter, and even in this case, it looks like to me this is probably either a cellular setup that's broadcasting information. So it's a relatively easy area to send information, but it's basically incredible crop management, and they can monitor everything from soil type conditions to actually, it doesn't need to be watered. What's the conditions of the soil? And in some cases, I love wine, so if I can get better wine out of this, I'll be a lot happier.
Yeah.
I think we have another video to talk
Yeah, we do. We have an example of a company that's being used in Iowa or Nebraska, I forget.
When University of Nebraska professor Richard Ferguson looks at a cornfield, he has no illusions.
To profitably produce corn in Nebraska, we have to apply nitrogen fertilizer. In many cases, in the past, we applied more than we really needed.
Ferguson wants to reduce the chance that excess nitrogen will get into the groundwater. His high-tech approach, called Project Sense, uses sensor technology to help farmers fertilize during the growing season, as timely and precisely as possible.
If we can make them more money by the use of the sensor technology, we think that's something they would adopt.
Project Sense is being put to the test in areas where groundwater nitrate levels are high. Today, it's at the Syme family farm in central Nebraska. The machine's arms have sensors that gauge how much nitrogen the plants need. A computer fires applicators to deliver fertilizer, practically feeding plants one by one.
Yeah, I've seen some of these kind of systems actually, again, a little bit stretch of with Internet of Things, but even bulldozers are being used in this manner. So you're driving down Route 27, there's a lot of construction over there in Montgomery County, a new communities being built with new homes, things like that. And the bulldozers all have these setups on there, and basically there's a small network established there that's geo-based, that as the bulldozer is driving through, it knows exactly where to plow the road within
Wow.
inches.
That is amazing.
So it's using a combination of a database in the back end that's driving as to where the bulldozer is going to go. And it's giving feedback. I don't know specifically how it's working, but I've read about it and seen it, the bulldozers out there as they're trying to navigate and clear cut new roads and things like that.
Interesting.
So let's talk about healthcare. And I know, Matt, you had a pretty interesting presentation a little bit ago that you went to.
Yeah, so just to touch base, or just to give an overview, we're talking about the monitoring, alert systems, data management, and just overall medicine. But we have things today such as smart watches and Fitbits that people use that can measure things like heart rate and talk, about how many steps you take per day. But this is really, the potential here is taking it to the next level. So we're talking about, completely changing the way colonoscopies are done, having little robots injected into your bloodstream that kind of measure your heart health real time, so it's reporting back to you through the cloud, back to you and your caregivers. So the doctor is getting real-time alerts on your health. So and this is not science fiction, but in about 10 years, the hospital may know that you're about to have a heart attack before you know that you're having a heart attack, and have everything ready for you. I actually went to ISTE, which is an educational conference out in Denver this year, and Dr. Michio Kaku talked about this quite a bit in his keynote presentation. And one thing that he was focused on was the end of cancer, and how these sensors that will be in the toilets as you produce waste in liquid form. Typically, it's going to be measuring cancer cells in your body and be able to catch it at a rate where you only have maybe 100 cancer cells. Versus when you go to the doctor and get a test, you may have 10,000, 100,000 cancer cells. And to be able to start that treatment so much earlier, they feel is really going to eliminate, maybe not all, but 90% of cancers that are out there.
So when we're sold this Internet of Things toilet in 5 or 10 years, may actually be a good thing.
Yeah.
Not just a clever...
Not that you want your toilet talking back to you, but you do. And not that there aren't privacy concerns. I mean, certainly he mentioned a lot of those things in his talk. And those are legitimate concerns, but the potential here for good is really outstanding.
And that's what you see a lot of this, and we'll get to it here shortly, is the potential and the capability, technically speaking, is almost becoming limitless. I mean, just, number of devices, where you can put them, how you can use them, what they can gather, what they can do, is really just, spread it out so much further than we used to have just a computer at our desktops. We now have all these things that are happening outside our networks and even outside our homes or our offices that can engage us. So let's just talk about some of those issues, because they become part of what's going on next. I mean, it's one thing to be able to do something, it's another thing, and what's if a bad thing happens. So we'll talk about in the next slide security issues, but there's some real concerns lately. This month and even last month, as I mentioned, there were 2 major Internet of Things attacks that happened. So security is going to be a big problem for us all, and how we find out ways to make our devices more secure. Generally, what we see is, name brands, trusted companies are going to be much more secure for you. Google, Apple, everyone has some questions or trust about them in some aspects, but it's much better to know what they're at least trying to accomplish for you, as opposed to an organization that, here's this Internet of Things device, it's a webcam, I threw it at my house, and I'm admitting, I have one of those devices in my house, and I have no clue if it's secure or not. I assume that it's not. I don't find anything that I would think that would be detrimental to my family or my personal life, so I use it very judiciously, but I do know that there are grave security concerns about these devices out there, and even not just these consumer goods, but how are these devices being used, and security being used, for government products and situations, or other business situations. It can be compromised very easily. And in some cases, that's not getting to the information, the databases. It's also being used to attack people in situations as well. So we have privacy concerns too, and a lot of these things have yet to be answered. I mean, we're still all discussing privacy issues and how it relates to our lives and country based on things that Snowden a few years ago. So there's a lot of things that have to be figured out, and there's a lot of things that again can be done, but should they be done, and how can they be done is another problem. I put the word up there, ecosystems. I've talked about it a couple times. I think that if anyone's really looking at implementing solutions, they really need to know the manufacturers, what the policies they may already have about the data they're keeping for you. Because a lot of times it may be a device. You may not realize that you may be connecting to a cloud system in the back end. My web camera, for example, I described that cheap camera I just threw in my house for $25. I'm connecting to a cloud-based service on the back end. I think I'm clicking through to my camera directly, but I'm actually clicking through to a service that's being provided for me. So you really have to understand what's the ecosystem, what are the privacy policies, and what security can they really provide for you. So let's just briefly talk about this attack that happened last Friday. Try to make it not technical, just try to make it as straightforward as possible. If you hadn't heard, a lot of services across the internet, I think especially across the East Coast, were inaccessible for a number of hours. Twitter, and I forget the extent of what they were, but basically it was the domain name service that got to that. And Matt, what's a domain name service?
Yeah, I like to equate it to the white pages phone book, if everybody is old enough to remember what the white pages phone book is. It's basically every service out there. So Google.com, we type it in as Google.com, but in actuality it's a string of numbers that no one's going to remember. So DNS basically connects the names to the actual numbers of the servers. So this attack basically takes down, and it was not a specific server that was attacking. It was a cluster of it was a service provider that serviced many. It was a one-to-many type attack. Right. So you're attacking the data center for one large group, and in the process taking down many people connected to it. So. And
how it related to the Internet of Things was that there was a component that was made by a Chinese manufacturer that was in many cameras and in DVRs, all right? And then because these devices were in home networks, security is very lax. So somebody was able to take these devices, control them, and direct communication from these devices, they think it was about 200,000 devices, to this domain name service.
Right.
So essentially it's like, instead of 2 or 3 people at a time walking up and asking for, and McDonald's asking for an order, imagine 200,000 people at one time saying, I want a hamburger. The system gets overwhelmed.
Sorry, we're closed.
Yeah, we can't handle it. So basically it's shut down, couldn't handle it, so that's those services. But again, the interesting part was the compromise occurred and was directed from Internet of Things devices. Now, this is not a new attack. Attacks like this have happened over in the past. What's different is it's using these less secure devices that were probably home cameras like mine, DVRs that may be out there, all with the same component made by this one Chinese manufacturer that had some openings and holes left into it.
Typically, things with passwords that were default passwords just shipped. And most people don't know. I mean,
right.
that's why they targeted consumers versus businesses. Hopefully, if you're a business, you've got a nice, strong firewall that's
right.
protecting some of these devices internally. You're not going to have that at
right.
home. So really, manufacturers need to step up a little bit and help out these people.
It's definitely one of the things that slows down the Internet of Things.
Right.
But it's also going to be the problem because people are still going to continue to move past it as they have already.
We have to figure it out because we're still moving forward with it.
Exactly. So some of the workers and what's being affected by this, first off, hardware engineers, software engineers, but some of the things you talked about, Matt, were just the non-technical people.
Yeah, electricians, people that work on cars. I mean, cars are fast becoming computers,
right.
Computers on wheels. Electricians, I mean, think about it. If your home has all these smart devices and an electrician comes in, they're going to not only have to know electricity, but they're also going to have to understand IP addressing and some of the things that they never thought about before.
Yeah.
And why would they?
And from a competitive standpoint, if I'm an electrician, I'd want to be on the front end of something like this.
Absolutely.
And it sounds like 5 to 10 years, maybe a plumber might need to have it as well.
Indeed. Yeah.
Things like that.
Speaking of Indeed.
Indeed. There you go. Indeed is actually an online career place for people to search for jobs and post their jobs. So I did a quick search just a couple weeks ago to see if there were any Internet of Things jobs out there. And just typing in IoT and looking for people looking for jobs, there are about, or companies looking for positions to fill. There's over 3,000 positions to fill with Internet of Things jobs are being posted.
That was surprising. Not that I don't think that these things are popular, but the amount of jobs was surprising.
And most of them are in the technology area, everything from product managers to engineers to software architects. So a lot of the back-end major companies. I think the big thing that I wanted to share with everybody in this is, we've had these major waves of technology change. First one being desktop computers back in the 80s, and then we had the internet happen in the 90s, and then mobile happened after that in just the last 10, 15 years. And this is the next wave of some of this stuff. Yeah. The mobile revolution that happened, or the evolution that occurred there, really was fulfilled by just a few companies, okay, and people who wrote apps. So we all benefited from that, but it was really a lot of companies. This is actually spreading out a little further. So it's affecting manufacturing, it's affecting agriculture, it's affecting anyone out there, electricians, like we talked about. So the opportunity is there in a lot of different ways that otherwise, the last wave of mobile was, I say, was shored up with a bunch of large companies and not necessarily to spread out. And this particular thing, Internet of Things, is being spread out, is what it comes down to. Just to close it out, a few Internet of Odd Things. I don't know if you've, the one I heard about first about a year ago was called the Internet of is a safe that I could access through my phone and unlock it. And I thought it was,
sounds terrible.
A number of ideas at the badge. I'm not sure. I don't want a safe that's accessible across the internet. Is what it comes down to.
Should be called a not safe.
Yeah. There's a candle out there you can buy, much like my camera. I can turn on a candle remotely from my house. No big deal. College dorm washing machines, you could get notifications. Some of these, they've actually implemented some of this, where the dryer is finished. So someone would get a notice if you're in a dorm that your dryer, your clothes are dry.
I mean, good for apartment complexes too, if you're a landlord or.
Sure. Pet feeding systems are available today, as a matter of fact, that you can remotely, just as much as you can turn lights on and off, you can actually feed your pet. I know some people can leave their cats for a few days, and this is a system you can actually feed your cats and walk away for a few days. The one silly one that came out about a year ago in the Wall Street Journal was the Internet of Things diaper. Basically, you get a cell phone notice. I don't know if it's real or not. It was more of a conversation, but I just thought the idea was kind of silly in itself.
That water leak?
Yeah, it's like you got exactly get a notice on your phone. So to wrap things up, so see if there's any questions out there. I do take a quick look here and see what we have. I have one question. It is a good one here. I was going to answer this one. Are there any standards being considered to provide better security, which is actually a good one? And the answer is not really. And that's one of the problems, that standards would help provide greater security, but there really is not. And until maybe some government intervention steps in, or some other coalition of businesses like Apple, Google, Amazon collectively work on some things, there's really been nothing to address security and aspects of some of this. There's some existing standards, but nothing that really speaks and addresses this type of technology together.
There is an international standards body for technology. I'm actually a little surprised, because they do the standard for wireless is 802.11.11. I'm a little surprised that they haven't at least tried to take a look at security. Maybe something's happening that I haven't read about, but I agree with you. I don't think there's anything.
Yeah, it's probably one of the weakest points about what's going on, and again, it's happening very quickly, and you can see by the numbers we talked about earlier on in the presentation, it's going to continue to accelerate in things like healthcare and any other vertical markets. There's a lot to be concerned and aware of as you continue to try to adopt and address the issues of taking on new technology like this. I want to thank everyone for joining us. Again, just to reiterate, we're Use Technologies. We provide, we have a very exciting cloud service out there that is very secure, as a matter of fact. Whether you're a solo practitioner in an accounting firm or in a mid-size law firm, we have this virtual office that can increase your security, help you work from anywhere, on any time, on any device. It's simply a way to virtualize your office, and if you are running into compliance issues with things like HIPAA or the IRS, we have a way to solve that problem for you, and a number of things that are out there in a way of technology and cloud services. And I want you to think about us not only for that, but also for your managed IT support. I know we have a few customers on the phone today, and we thank you for joining us. One last question: what kind of basic security steps should an individual take? That's a good question, Jennifer.
Most, yeah, thanks, Jennifer. Most internet providers for home, like Comcast or Verizon Fios or whoever you may use, will give you a firewall, a software firewall built into the router. You want to make sure that that is secure, because most people just, it's set up and they don't think about it. And then you may have to call Comcast or call Verizon for help with that. But there are extra things that they can do to secure that. I know that there are some content filters that you can have at home as well that block certain things. So there are steps that you can take from home. Most people do not take them, but there are some things that you can do to make it secure. It's not going to be as secure as a regular beefy firewall at the office.
My suggestion is not to use inexpensive, products that I bought.
Well, and if you do, and many people will,
right?
If it has a default password, make sure
make sure you change
that
password. That would be definitely.
That's good step one.
Password management is a big thing we talk about all the time. It's important. Using well-branded, recognizable name brands like Apple, Google, Insteon, things like that have really kind of know their stuff.
If I can get a webcam from China for 25 cents. There's probably a reason for that.
Yeah, exactly. Again, we'd like to thank you for your time. Please email me with any questions. You can be reached at dave@easttech.com. I have a blog and would like to hear more from you as well. We have a survey that's going out about our webinar today. And yes, Toby, it was recorded, and hopefully I'll share information for you about that as well. Again, I want to thank everyone for attending, and have a great day.
Thanks, everybody.